Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Careers Sitrep. Happy Friday. My goodness me, happy Friday, the 30th of September. So the Careers Sitrep, this regular slot which we use to have a good old chat about service leavers, veterans into certain sectors and employment. My goodness, what a few weeks we've just had. When you think about the last 2 or 3 weeks, we have had a really very sad news about Her Majesty. And then there's sort of a period when we're all spending a lot of time thinking about that. And then a new Prime Minister, a new government, and my goodness, in the last week, so much has happened on the economic side in the country. You could almost write a whole huge amount of a book on just the last few days and the impact it's going to have. But anyway, we're not going to cover that, but some of it does have an impact on what we're going to be chatting about this afternoon. So we're going out live on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube. And I know there's been quite a few people out there, and you're most welcome to join in with the conversation, with the chat. But we'll be covering a lot of these the subjects that we've been running through. And what we want to talk about today is very, very topical because it's the end of September and we're going to be talking about seasonal work. And I say it's topical, you might think, what's that about? Christmas? It's a bit early. But no, it's not, because actually, frankly, if you leave it too late and to sort of, when it comes to Christmas time and sort of December, actually every company who needs seasonal support has already got their people. So now is the time to be starting to think about this. And there's a lot of great opportunities out there. All right, so we're going to be talking about these things, how it's a great opportunity for veterans, for service leavers, for spouses, partners, all sorts of people who we all support. Anyway, it's not going to be me talking for the next hour or so. I'm delighted to be joined by a very special group of guests today, some fantastic people. And so first I'd like to welcome got Claire Jackson joining us, who is in M&S. She's actually Deputy Store Manager, but she's also the Vice Chair of the Forces Community Network for M&S, which is fantastic, and also a military spouse, so knows a lot about all this. And we really look forward to hearing what you've got to say, Claire, in a moment. And also, huge warm welcome to Ryan McNally up in the Northeast. And Ryan's a store manager for M&S, ex-Army veteran, has been with M&S for 25 years, and an amazing story, really, because when left the Army, went into a seasonal job, and that's one which has morphed into a permanent role. And we'll hear much more about this, and where he is now in a sort of much more senior role in M&S. So it's an amazing story. Welcome, Ryan. Great to see you, and we look forward to chatting as well. And lastly, but by no means least, is Joanne McLeod, the legendary Joanne McLeod, who is the manager for the Forced Employment Charities EM3 program, a very important program in the whole M3 enterprise area, which is really great, dealing with veteran service leavers, etc., and with a huge amount of experience, and also a military spouse as well. So fantastic to be here this afternoon. And so I still would just chat about, before we go into the more specific stuff about seasonal work and with some top tips, I think, for anyone who's listening into it. Perhaps just to talk more generally, as we start off, about our own experiences and certainly perhaps the advice that we got. And I know, Claire, perhaps, what's your sense when you, as you can remember back when your partner was serving, his transition, I suppose, and where were the best sources of advice and what did you think of it?
I think generally a lot of our family and friends were the ones that kind of shared a lot of advice. A lot of my family and friends are in retail, so it was a natural affinity to kind of being in that. A lot of our friends are from the military world, so again, the affinity of joining those two worlds together. And I think that I think it was just bringing those two worlds together and just being really open to how different the military world is to retail, but how similar it is as well, if that makes sense.
No, I completely agree. I mean, actually, in a way, we're talking about, family, friends, it's a network. People do talk about networking, and sometimes people think that's sort of going into a room with people who don't know and just somehow making it, and it is a bit of that. But actually, having your own networks and family and friends are incredibly important in this, particularly those with experience, if they've gone through some sort of journey just before you did. No, that's very, very good. And Ryan, in terms of, what was your advice? Did you get some good advice when you were serving or anything like that? Or
So yeah, so like, I joined the army when I was 16. So like, I left school with GCSEs, but they weren't great. Going to be really honest with you. And I thought, when I left the army at 21, I came back to the northeast with no plans. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was doing. So I used sort of the army charities that were around at the time, or the military charities that were around at the time, and in particular, sort of SAFA. They helped me loads to sort of get me settled back into the northeast, and then sort of find job opportunities out there. And the one that I went for, is the one that I'm still in now. So yeah, it was great help. And of course, friends and family do help as well. I remember initially when I first came back, I had 2 job interviews in one day. One with M&S and one with one of our competitors. I'll not name which one. And I got offered both jobs, and obviously I stuck with the M&S one because I went to see my mum, I went to see my sisters, I went to see everybody. I thought, look, I've got 2 options. Yeah, what do I go with? And they said it's got to be the M&S one. So, and that's what I've been ever since.
That's amazing, and that's 25 years, which is, I mean, crikey, for any sort of career, that's a long time in companies now, which is a fantastic achievement. And isn't it lovely that you've got something which, as you say, local, close to where you wanted to be?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably another theme which we'll probably explore a bit over the next few minutes about the seasonal work. Great if it is local, which reduces your travel costs and stuff. No, that's great, Ryan. And actually, so Joanne, what's your sense of it? I mean, in terms of, you've gone through in fact, your partner's actually still serving, I think, isn't he?
He is, yeah. So my husband's still serving, so we've not quite got there yet, although we are sort of coming up to that period. He's got 4 years left, so I think being in this job quite helps him start thinking well in advance of when he needs to start thinking about what he's going to do next. But I mean, he's in a job where we move around so much, so actually he's not had to think about his career, but I've had to think about mine. And actually, prior to working for Forces Employment Charity, I was actually a medical photographer in the NHS. That's what I've got a degree in, that's where my profession was. But moving around so much in such a specialist career was pretty much impossible as a military spouse with a husband away. So that sort of brought me to Forces Employment Charity, and I'm here now managing the EM3 Armed Forces Veterans and Families Programme.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I mean, it's again a fantastic story you got, and just the importance of when we're talking about these networks and families and friends, and I think there is a real theme, isn't there? I mean, many people we know more generally might go down a certain route because their mates or their friends have just done it a couple of years back, and if they're enjoying it, they say, "Oh, crikey, it's a great." And we have seen that in certain companies, certain sectors. And quite often you have a whole flow of people who are coming out of the armed forces into a certain area because there's a whole, but sometimes it's great when people do find a new good thing, and then they can actually encourage others. Now, it's a very interesting thing. I mean, clearly there are a lot of attributes, I think we're talking about, that people who are serving or have served, done military service, and indeed spouses as well and partners. I mean, what do you think, and Claire, what would you say is the main thing that you would say is the thing that employers really like, what they like and one of the reasons why they would be so keen to employ veterans?
I mean, I think there's a number of attributes and skill sets and all of that kind of stuff, but I think the biggest one that stands out for me as a colleague that would recruit is resilience. Even though retail is there, it's something we all use, it's a constant, it's such an ever-changing beast, and actually the resilience that our teams need to currently show is even more than that's ever been. And I think that having that resilience from a veterans or a spouse point of view really really helps to kind of showcase what they've got and what they've what they're known for and can do every day that some civilians might struggle with. So resilience would be my top one.
Do you think that, from our experience, that a lot of people when they're serving or they're coming out don't really realise what the attributes they've got are going to be valuable? Do you sense that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've interviewed veterans in the past, and you sit there and you kind of going, that's great, that's amazing, and they almost undersell themselves a little bit because it's almost that humbleness of, actually I don't really want to talk about this because I just do it. And if I relate myself to my husband, it's just a job, but there's so many skills that are underlying that absolutely align with that retail role, all different levels, but it's a very different world, but such a similar world, and some of the skill set is so similar.
I mean, it is an interesting point, isn't it? Because I mean, I think it is a theme that, you know, people serving don't really realise. I mean, even like, as you say, resilience, Claire. I mean, you know, when people join, they say, okay, fine, you go through training and stuff, but you don't always want to make comparisons if you haven't gone through that experience. But Ryan, is that your sense that a lot of people, when they're serving, don't really understand what the skills they are, which will be attractive to the employer? Yeah.
Definitely not. Even for myself as well, you know, when I first came into the business, the transitional skills that I had, like, you know, just talking to customers, you know, a lot of the younger people that when I joined, I was only 21 when I joined this business, and they didn't have that confidence to talk to customers, where I came in, I was full of confidence, and my leaders and my managers were like, this guy's got something about him, so we want to keep him, and that's probably why I stayed a little longer. But just going back to one of the points earlier, Alistair, I don't know if you know, but M&S run a friends and family scheme as well, so I personally, I recommend a lot of colleagues to stores. And we're working at the minute to try and get friends and family from my network into stores as well. So I've got a couple of colleagues who are still sort of in the Catterick and Harrogate area, still serving, and their sons, daughters are moving back to the northeast. So we're trying to get them into the business that way.
That's excellent. No, I hadn't heard of that. That's a great thing. It's interesting when you think about that point on resilience, and, you know, being a sort of people who, you know, used to getting up in the middle of the night or being on time. And with that, we take that for granted. It's drilled into us, doesn't it? But I mean, there are, you know, say probably quite a few people who haven't had the experience. It's not so nice comment here from Helen. Really interesting. Dad and grandfather in the military and 9 employed was really interesting in my life journey and the skills this gave me. Being adaptable, people skills, resilience. So there's Helen saying resilience as well. So it's a top word. There are other things as well. That's a really good point. Thanks, Helen. Yeah, and I expect you see this as well, Joe, don't you? I mean, in terms of the people you're talking to, getting into their areas which you're supporting. I mean, again, perhaps many of them need to understand what their attributes are for employers.
It's absolutely the biggest thing when working with military spouses is that they do exactly the same thing as Claire mentioned. They massively undersell themselves, and whether that is a deliberate underselling or whether that's that they just actually can't identify what they're capable of. Quite often they'll have gaps in their CV from the amount of times that they've moved around, and all they can see is those gaps. And actually, with a bit of sort of guidance and coaching, we can fill those gaps with what they've been doing in the meantime. And one of our colleagues, one of the ladies that works with us, she often refers to military spouses as their own project managers, because they can move a house on their own with no family, husband or wife deployed, new skills for the children. And people just don't think about that as things that they could actually put into a job. When you say to them, "Oh, well, what would you like to do?" I've just done this previously, and not about what they're doing in their life that they can directly transfer. And it is that adaptability. They can absolutely go into any workplace and give those ethics to the workplace that they give in their family life. But they sometimes just need that bit of support to get there.
I mean, it's such a thing, isn't it? I mean, I'll be honest, I don't think enough attention was made to supporting, frankly, partners and spouses in service. I think the Ministry of Defence has really woken up to that now, and there's more support. And of course, we run a programme because there are so many reasons why it's important to do it. But the main thing is the incredible talent that is there, which is perhaps in the past, you know, when people are moving around every couple of years, every sort of 2-3 years or so, just wasn't really exploited. And so I mean, Claire, do you say that? I mean, what sort of things were you seeing from the spouse or partners, as opposed to just veterans, which makes them really attractive?
I think it's just as Joe said, that whole piece of being able to just get on with something. They've had that kind of, you know, task given, that's what they're going to do, the determination to get the job done on their own, you know, the ambiguity of that world, and they bring all of that into the workplace. I think also for their colleagues, once they're there, and I'm thinking about a particular colleague that I know, and obviously, you know, from myself, they can bring a different viewpoint, which allows people to open up to a different world. So we talk a lot about being more inclusive and diverse, and, you know, and actually it allows people to see the other things that are happening, and actually what skill sets they can take from other people. So yeah, I think there's a definite need for more spouses, more veterans, you know, to kind of be part of our workforce, definitely, because they've just got, I think we could all sit all day, couldn't we, and just write a list of everything that they could bring. But yeah, there's definitely a place for them, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, it is really interesting, and I think it's this thing about being able to, well, as Joanne was saying, you know, do train in one thing, but actually sort of pivot and do something completely different. And I think that's, again, right across the board. I mean, I think there's an interesting theme in, you know, for people who are serving. And people always talk about, people who have training and stuff. Well, that's true. But it's not just about the training course that they've had, but the ability to be trained and switch to something new. And I think it's I think sometimes it's not really understood very well. You know, people say, well, if they've got an engineering qualification in the Army or the Air Force, that they go into that sort of job. Well, yeah, but they also, the fact they've been trained into something, or it might be a young infantier in the Army, he's had quite a lot of sort of quite demanding training. Well, he's not going to be doing exactly the same thing in civilian life, but that training experience means easily able to take on a new skill. And it's a thing which we do talk to employers a lot about this. But no, I think there are a whole range of things. I mean, there's veteran skills, and then there's, on top of that, then you add the sort of the partners and spouses attributes and experiences, which make them so hugely important and valuable for. I always do think that, and again, Claire, your view on this, would be interested. I don't think we have to say, you know, feel sorry for the people who've served. You sometimes think it is a welfare thing. It's good for the bottom line, because these are very, very good, capable individuals. I mean, do you share that view, Claire?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, I know Ryan, and we've spent some time together, and you know, I think we have similar mindsets in terms of that drive, that nature, that task driven, which our business currently is very task heavy. And I think, you know, getting that off the list and doing a full job, a complete, finish a job. And I just think that, yeah, it just brings that together and allows kind of, it's hard to kind of almost put into words what you can do with military and spouses together. But yeah, I think it's just that determination just to get the job done and get in there and just be proud. And I think the one thing for me across the board, and I don't know if Ryan agrees, you can't teach someone to be a team player. And I think you either are or you aren't. And I think that military world allows everybody to come together as a team. And ultimately, you might work on a silo project in retail, but you are part of a team. And I think that's a really important one that any veteran or spouse can bring, you know, is that team dynamic and that teamwork, definitely.
Completely. I completely agree. It's a very good point. I mean, I think sometimes what we're talking about really is, you know, when people don't really understand it, it does become a barrier to people getting into good roles. And it's always one thing about the point of perhaps even the conversation. So for people listening who might think, crikey, I don't have the skills, I don't have the experience to go for these sort of things. Well, you know, have the confidence, go for it, because the understanding of transferable skills isn't that great, I think, in people in the serving, and again with spouses as well. And all the time we're seeing new sectors, like, you know, different conversation about the tech cyber industry, which is growing very quickly, and a lot of particularly spouses and partners are brilliant at it, and they can do it from home and everything. But no, it's a very interesting thing. I mean, Joe, what's your, you know, in terms of other barriers to getting into work that veterans or military spouses have? Are there any other things which you think of?
I mean, I think that transferable skills thing is a huge one. It's understanding how to switch, whether you've done something like, whether you've been in service or whether you were me that's been in the NHS, and how to flip that from what you're doing into what you want to do. I think it takes a lot of work to be able to do that, even within those civilian roles that I've done. So then to be able to do that from a serving role into a civilian role afterwards, and I think that's something that over the next few years coming up, will be discussed, that we will have to discuss in our household as well, about how we make that transition from one to the other. But in terms of other barriers, I think that, I mean, military spouses themselves have, those that are still in serving families, they have the barriers that come with being attached to the armed forces, the childcare, the being away from families. But I mean, for all the reasons I said earlier about the military spouse and them being adaptable, and these are things that can be managed, and the options and the opportunities are increasing as well, with additional funding for childcare and things like that. So I think that it is something that you can work around, particularly going to roles like M&S that have got these employers that are so willing to have people from the armed forces community. I say just go for it and talk about it, and hopefully the flexibility can be there if you need it.
That's really excellent, Jo. And Ryan, I mean, when you see some veterans coming to you to apply to your store of coming in, I mean, do you see that again? I mean, do you see them?
Yeah, we see that. But something that was I don't think you're aware of is we do this with students a lot, where they transfer in and out of stores. So, say for example, if Claire's got a colleague in her store who is a spouse or a child of someone that's in the forces that is moving up to the northeast, and they want to move with them, we would look to see if we can move them into one of our stores local for them as well. So we do a lot of that with students, and I think there's a big gap where we can do that with veterans and spouses and kids of spouses as well. And I think especially them, the younger ones, especially if they're leaving to go to university and things like that, that's probably where we can sort of pick the bones of that one and see if we can get more into the business that way as well. Definitely.
Excellent. Okay, no, that's really good. So these are all really very useful things, more generically about people coming into, veterans leaving and partners and spouses and stuff. But sort of considering a bit more of the sort of seasonal topic, which we want to cover. Claire, I mean, how do we define this? I mean, what is it? I mean, everyone has a view about Christmas and stuff, but what are we really talking about? And why is there sort of big build up, and which sort of sectors are needing more people?
So, yeah, we talk about seasonal and we automatically think about Christmas, but we've got quite a few peaks in terms of trading that we talk about seasonal intake. So it is primarily for Christmas and for our peak trading, but there will also be like a summer intake, because obviously our takings then kind of shift over the summer period. So, I mean, if I just give you some stats just to bring it to life a little bit. So from a seasonal point of view, we're expected to recruit and bring on board circa 6,000 people just for that Christmas period across the business. So we're not talking a small amount here. We're talking, quite a substantial, opportunity. And our veteran network currently is only 1,055. So across the business. So there's a huge opportunity within that 6,000 to bring more people on board. And then in terms of that seasonal working pattern, we extend our trading hours, and our operational hours increase hugely. So most of our stores or operations, at Castle Donington, for example, which is one of our distribution centres, is a 24-hour operation. So whereby we naturally think that we recruit into stores and it's customer facing, selling turkeys and, getting all of that kind of, nice Christmas product out. There's so many other areas of our business that we need to recruit in, because everything increases. So logistically, our distribution increases, our, hospitality trade increases. So, for people that have got a hospitality background in the military, they could find themselves working in our digital cafes, or, within our catering units, or whatever that might look like. So, yeah, there's a vast amount of different roles that naturally fall into seasonal, but all the way through the year as well. It just gets heightened as we go into our peak seasonal trading. So lots of different opportunities. There's very few opportunities, I will add, in our support centres over peak, because naturally we see that resource move into stores to support the operation.
Okay.
But through the year and in our summer intakes, actually that then increases in our support centres. So that can be anything from, you know, buying, planning, finance. So lots of different roles, you know, that the teams can tap into. So it's a bit of a different journey throughout the year, but obviously we see our biggest increase from now up until the week before Christmas. We're still intaking.
Wow.
So yeah.
That's amazing. And I suppose really that what you're talking about is, a huge uplift in opportunities. But these are temporary contracts, presumably, but ones which can then lead to, you can have a good look at the individuals. And then if they got the ability, you can say, right, we'll extend this to a permanent, which is what Ryan's experience was. Yeah. So obviously that's the deal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting. And so Ryan, with your own experience, when was it when you were in your temporary role? How long was it in that where then you realised it was going to become a permanent one?
Yeah, so I started in the October as a Christmas peak temp, literally all the way through Christmas. Christmas Eve, the line manager came up to us and said, "You've done a cracking job, we want to keep you." And I'm going to be honest, I wasn't that keen at the first day. Oh, that was horrific. That couple of months, that was really hard work. I don't know if I want to stay here. Can I come back to you? Because I was in the week after, so I had a couple of days off over Christmas to think about it. And literally when I went back in the next day, she came to see us straight away. So I knew she wanted us, and that's probably what made the difference. You know, I think if she had left it for me to go to her, as soon as I walked in the door, she came straight up to me and says, "Right, have you had to think about it? This is the contract. Are you going to take it?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. You know, you clearly want it, so I'm definitely staying." Yeah.
And was it a bit easier after Christmas? Did the workload?
It was literally after Christmas, but and we do that now. You know, we've literally, as a store manager and as a store, we've literally just recruited because we're going through a renewal process. So our shop's getting a refit. So we've had to massively intake. I'd probably say between 25 and 50% in uptake of staffing resource for the next 4 weeks, and that is all temporary 4-week contracts. So, like Claire said, it's not just at Christmas where we need resource and on temporary occasions. We've got stores in the northeast as well that are holiday stores. Literally, you know, they peak at times when some of those stores are really quiet. So, especially the summer times, you know, some of the areas around Northumberland coastline and things like that, they get really, really busy. So we need to do peak recruitment in them stores at a different time of the year. So we're continually recruiting all the time.
Gosh, it's interesting how that regional variation then as well.
Yeah.
You know, as you say, right by the coast in the summer when there's a lot of tourists and people, you know, extra visitors. But I suppose it's fair to say that, you know, in the experience we all had over the last couple of years, I mean, the retail it's been tough, hasn't it? With the COVID and lockdowns and everything. But now everything's full on, and then you add on top of that Christmas and the extra need. But I mean, do you say the sector is now recovering from that period when it was more difficult? I mean, is you absolutely full on now in terms of needing?
I think if you look wherever you are living now, you look at your high street, there's not a lot of people out there, as in shops. You know, the high streets are getting decimated. So, you know, the retail parks, the outer towns, this is probably where the business is going. And I think for the veteran society and, you know, the veteran community, that's probably where the jobs are going to. And if you think of them areas, you know, there's a lot of support network within that as well. So there's definitely a lot of movement with it from the high streets into them towns, out of the town centres, into the retail parks.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I think it's something that Claire touched on about, you know, there are multiple different types of roles as well, aren't there? And then, you know, you're saying there's logistics, there's retail, you know, people in various things, and then there's probably, you know, supply chain, all the bits and pieces, which all come together to, you know, in this very important sector, which are all increased at this time of year. So,
interestingly, again, Alistair, M&S have just bought out their food supply chain. So we've literally just bought out Gist. So again, all the colleagues that work at Gist were in M&S. They've now been, in the military term, rebadged to M&S. So there'll be opportunities within the food warehouses as well, for drivers, for warehousemen, you know, for warehouse ladies, everything like that. So, you know, the business is growing. You know, we've got Akada, which is a sort of joint venture. You know, there's loads of opportunities out there.
Gosh, that's amazing, actually. That's I've seen the lorries and stuff with those geese trucks and stuff. So they're actually going to become part of Marx's M&S now, are they?
Just is, yes. Food Gist, we bought it out.
Okay. No, that's very interesting. I mean, it's interesting to explore in the roles, because I mean, so for people who think it's not just, there might be a perception about a certain thing, but I think perhaps there's a theme here that there's multiple different types of opportunity, and people have got to really engage and look. It's not just a case of, and I suppose it's fair to say that I know we're talking very much about M&S and all the amazing things you've got and opportunities, but there's another example of probably someone like the Royal Mail. Everyone knows more packages go around and Christmas time, and I'm sure they do have their own sort of seasonal recruitment, don't they? If people want to get into that, I suppose Joe, you see a bit of this as well, even in the M3 area. There's going to be quite a few logistics companies and an M&S down there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, all of the organisations are going to be recruiting over this seasonal time, aren't they? And when I was on the families team, I worked with a lady who was working as an elf at Longley over the seasonal period, whilst she was working towards her future career. But she took on this job as an elf at Longley, and absolutely loved it. So it goes so much wider than just retail. There's things happening that wouldn't be happening at other times in the year, and I think that's why the Armed Forces community and veterans are so good at these roles, because the work is so hard over that short period of time to fit in everything that needs to fit in, that they just sort of knuckle down and get it done. The work ethic is there to put the hard work in. And the work that we are doing in Surrey and Hampshire as well, it will be logistics. There is the supermarkets, the M&S in those areas also. And we also, what Ryan was saying about moving the young people and the students from one store to another, we also support service children in our area as well. So that's really good to hear that, because a lot of those will be looking for their first jobs at this seasonal period. And it's really good to hear that they'll be able to move within M&S from one place to the other as well.
I mean, that's a really good point. So it is actually at all different levels and frankly different ages as well, isn't it? I suppose. I mean, is it fair to say that, I mean, a lot of this people could be having another job. I mean, so some of these could be part-time roles as well, I'm sure. Yeah. So it could be, it's an additional bit of extra cash. Yeah, meaning people are going to work hard, but on top of their other job. Is that what you see, Ryan and Claire? I mean, quite a few part-time people doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll go. Yeah. There's I've got 53 colleagues in my store, and just off the top of my head, I know at least 12 of them that this is a part-time job and they do something else. And what they normally do is their other job is usually from home, so they'll work from home for 20 hours and they'll do between 12 and 16 hours in store, and that's just again to supplement the salary over the next couple of weeks and months.
So I think that flexibility will be really attractive for many people, and obviously, crikey, we're going to this sort of, rising energy costs, inflation, and all this sort of fairly bleak picture we're starting to get. So people are, to earn some extra money, meaning, on top of whatever else people are doing, but there's an opportunity there with the flexibility. And I think the track record of our veteran service leavers and our spouses, etc., being prepared to knuckle down and work hard can actually get some really good extra money here. So I think that's it's an interesting theme which has come through here. So I think I mean I wonder about the levels. I mean we talk. In fact, it's interesting Joe's example about school leavers or people doing some work in the holidays. But I mean we're talking about various roles and levels here. But Claire, I mean, can you see it? Are there more senior opportunities here as well? Do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, Ryan is a prime example of kind of how you would work through to that senior level, and I believe there's about 9 different programs that we offer as a business in terms of moving into some of the senior roles that we offer, or leadership roles as we call them. From team managers, so that is managing on the ground, that is on the sales floor, that is driving that team, leading and putting the customer at the heart of everything. And then moving into my level, Ryan's level, even further up from a regional perspective. So there's no blockers in terms of once you're in the, you know, the M&S world, there are no blockers apart from yourself and what you kind of bring to the party almost. There's school leavers programs, there's A-level programs, there's stepping into programs, which is for colleagues that are already in the business but want to progress and try to be a TM with no pressure. So that's like a 12-week program, for example, that helps them learn all the skill sets. So even if you step into M&S and you feel that it's, you know, you need to learn a whole new world of skills, actually there's lots of platforms for you to learn and develop as you go at all levels. And obviously from a support centre perspective, you know, there's different levels within that as well. So dependent on qualifications, that could be an area where, you know, you flourish and move through the ranks, as we say, quite quickly. So there's opportunities at all different levels. You know, I think me and Ryan are testament to that in terms of both starting as on the ground and kind of working our way through the programs to kind of get to where we are now. So yeah, so there's no barriers for that at all.
It's very interesting. And I've just thoughts occurred to me now as well about, again, I mean, not an expert, but in terms of what the whole supply chain then to support M&S, you know, to have the increased volumes which you're putting through the store, you know, and different things, you know, like as you mentioned, turkeys. But obviously when you go back through that, back to the farms and increased stuff, and there's job opportunities there. And I suppose that right across the sector, there's an increased need for people who can do this stuff, you know, and also the transportation, the logistics side. But I mean, going back to, well, I mean, something I'm personally not much into, but around Halloween time, when you see all of the not turnips, sort of the
pumpkins.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I completely forgot. But you see the, you know, farms having to produce that at a massive sort of time to get all those things out. But then the same thing for this. You think of all the stuff which happens at Christmas. So I suppose it's a much bigger picture across the country than, you know, the role specifically actually just in the store, isn't it? You know, there's a big supply chain tail.
I think there's also our Castle Donington site, which I've mentioned before. There's I think 43 veterans that work just at that Castle Donington site, and quite a few of them are engineers, as in past experience, that have come into the business to help with the machinery and kind of bring that absolute skill set into something really specific that, you know, we struggle to recruit for. So that's why, you know, in their Castle Donington specifically have done an absolutely amazing job at targeting our veterans and saying we have got specific roles for you that require less almost new learning, and actually we just need you for what you do and come in and do it for us. And the network within that area is amazing. Some of the, you know, the team dynamics in there is great. So it's that part as well. So, you know, there's tons of different things that we can offer to veterans and spouses.
That's great, because I was interested when you know your military network, and I mean, do you have a pretty good handle on all the veterans? I mean, do some people join and not wanting necessarily to say that they've served? I mean, is it easy to track people and, you know, build this community which you've got in M&S?
Yeah, so I think the network's in its kind of infancy of a couple of years in, and we're working really hard to be the voice of our forces community, and bring people out of the shadows a little bit to say, you know, this community is here for you, and it is not just another business network that almost, you know, talks about business. It's a network, it's a community. You know, ultimately we want to use that network to support like-minded people that are in the same environments and have the same questions and thoughts, and you know, and just build a real community. Now obviously we do different things, so you know, we support all the activities around remembrance, for example, but generally that network is about a community feel, and a lot of people are silent partners within that, so we'll look and listen and, you know, but don't actually partake. And part of us is saying you have a voice and we want to hear it, and you know, we're there to support each other. So yeah, I know Ryan's part of that network and listens to me daily with my posts and stuff. So yeah.
I think it's such an important thing, and I think probably fair to say, 5 or 10 years ago, I don't think these sort of networks did exist in the same way, because I do think what was happening is that far more employers like M&S are far more incentivized to support and look, veterans, not just just to have them per se, but it's actually because they know that they are going to be very valuable in the workforce. So I the reason why I say that is that probably means that it's better now for services and veterans to be proud to be open and upfront with it, whereas 10 years ago they might have been embarrassed or thought it might have been against them. And it's fair to say there are a few companies, employers around the country who aren't necessarily encouraged or think straight away that they would be good to veterans, and we are working on those as well to make sure that they do understand. But it's fantastic, I think, what you do in M&S, just with that network, and it means that there is this thing we started off the conversation about networks and people and supporting and friends. So many people can understand if there's a network there, and through their friends and colleagues or relations even understand all these opportunities out there. But Joanne, in your experience, and where you are now, do you see the same thing with some of the companies, the employers that you're dealing with? Say there are some who are less motivated or incentivized, and others who are really full on and have their own military networks. Is that what you see as well?
Yeah, I think so. We've been doing some work with the employers in Surrey and Hampshire, and we're finding that some of them are really excited to get on board with supporting the armed forces community. It's all part of their sort of ambitions. So when they hear that they can do that through joining our programme and supporting our programme, they're really keen to get on board. And then there's others that we're speaking to who haven't really had any idea that it was a thing, that actually they're missing out on this talent pool by not directly recruiting from the armed forces community. And we're doing some work with them to talk about the skills that the entire armed forces community have and how they can fit within their organisations. So yeah, actually, we've only been on our programme's only been going since the beginning of this year. We've already made some real good headway with employers that this time sort of 6 months ago weren't even considering having an armed forces network or recruiting from our community, who are now actively signed up and ready to take people on to not just employment but training opportunities and apprenticeships through our programme. So yeah, we're finding that it completely varies. Some people are already doing it. Some had no idea that they should be doing it. But we are actively working to increase everyone's knowledge on it.
Yeah, that's very good. It's fair to say, isn't it, that I suppose we've got, we talk about a job seekers market right now. We've had the lowest unemployment. We've gone through this very weird thing a couple of years ago when we're in the COVID state. A lot of companies suddenly stopped recruiting, they furloughed people, and it was a very different picture. We're now completely the reverse of that. We've had low unemployment, high numbers of jobs. But I think the sense that I've got, and I'd be interested in, Claire, if your sense on this as well, but is that about to change? Given the rising costs, rising prices and stuff, perhaps more concerns with the economy going into next year, do you think the job opportunities may well reduce slightly? How do you sort of see that working?
I mean, at the moment, we're still on a track to recruit a similar volume, especially seasonally. I think, it's like everything, isn't it? Things need to play out for us as a business to understand what impact that's going to have. But I think we are definitely working more efficiently. But if I was to bet after several years of recruiting, is it going to change? I would probably say no. At points, we may put a bit of a stop on it, but I think it's something that we continue to do. We have leavers every week, whether that's for additional job opportunities, retirement, family circumstances. So there's always a gap. So it's never as if we're going to shut the doors completely and go, that's it, we're done recruiting. I think it's an ever moving beast. But who knows what the future looks like for retail and for, as you say, employment going forward.
Yeah, interesting. And I think, everyone is, needs to keep aware of, the picture as it changes in the next year. I'm cracking there are quite a few other big strategic factors which will impact as well. I mean, naturally we also hear that the government is planning quite a significant increase in the defence budget. What does that mean? At this stage, we don't really know. Is that more people joining? Are they going to increase the size? There's things happening, I think, next year, which will be really quite interesting, how that impacts on the economy and companies. So I think it's going to be an interesting time. And but there's a lot of advice and tips and stuff. And I really want to come on to that, actually, about if we're sort of summing up, capturing the sort of top tips for people, particularly who are still serving or spouses out there watching. I mean, Ryan, if you would say, what are your key top tips for veterans and service leavers?
I think if you're still serving, get the help that's in the military now. Start early, start looking early, start thinking about where you're going to be settled. If you're from the northeast but you actually want to settle down south, you need to start looking at that area, obviously. Talk to your family. That's obviously the biggest thing I can say. What do they want to do? Because it's not just about you. You've got to make them happy as well. And then literally just walk into some of these shops, some of these businesses, introduce yourself. This is who I am. This is what I can offer you. If you've got anything coming up, let me know.
Excellent. That's very, very useful, I think. Really resonate big time. Joanne, what would be your sort of key top tips for people?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. When we sort of call it the hidden job market, Ryan, with the sort of going into shops and asking about vacancies that aren't necessarily online, you might get yourself a job before it's even been advertised.
Yeah.
So yeah, I completely agree with that. But I mean, ultimately, in terms of seasonal work, once you're in a job, it then makes it easier to get your next job because you can keep your CV up to date, and we can get those transferable skills on the CV. So when it comes to the seasonal work, I would say start looking now, look at what's available around your skill set, get the support if you need to identify that skill set to work out which seasonal job you want to go into. But also that just because it's a seasonal job, it still treat it as the job that you want to do. You still need to put as much effort into the application, tailor it to the job spec, and making sure that you are putting your best skills onto your CV to get that application in. But yeah, that's for me. And then once you're in there, you could be Ryan going on from his seasonal role into a 25-year career. You never know.
Yeah. With more years to come, I'm sure, Ryan, as well.
Another
25 years. 50 years with MLS. That's a great list, John. And Claire, what would could you add to those? And any more things which come to mind?
Yeah, I think echo everything that everybody said, but I think once you're in that job, treat it as it's your future. It's not just a seasonal job. It's not just any job, it's an M&S job. But just go for it full pelt. And one thing that I would absolutely encourage, bring yourself to work. We're looking for personality. We are looking for people that are different. We don't just want people that are all the same. Bring that personality to life and just be yourself. And actually that is something that a lot of people have got their jobs on the back of, generating in terms of their future. So yeah, that would be my advice.
I think that's a great point, particularly, well, they're all good points, but that last one in particular, I mean, being yourself, because some people think they've got to be something different, but I mean, actually most people, most of our veterans, service leavers, reservists, partners, all they've got to do, I mean, if it wants to get an interview, just be yourself. And most people are pretty wowed, actually. The interesting is getting to that interview sometimes, but actually, and we've been working with employers to get some, and it's happened in areas of the civil service. There's a compulsory interview, or it's a guaranteed interview scheme, which is very nice. So once the application goes in, you get an interview, and it might be that people who go for a particular role and then they shine at an interview, not for that role, but for something else as well. But no, I like that point about being yourself. I mean, I think that our community, the armed forces community, has a lot of people with tremendous character, spirit, experience, and characteristics which we're sort of used to, and a lot of those things are incredibly valuable. So people shouldn't lose that. So I would, if I was adding to the list, and And thanks. I mean, I think the first thing is, if I was going to summarize it, I was going to say top tips. There's a huge amount of support out there, and look at it. In fact, forced employment. There's for people, service leavers, there's the Career Transition Partnership. There's a lot of stuff which happens in that advice. Then Through Life, charities like the Forced Employment Charity. There's a huge amount of support and advice out there. So do tap into it, do the research, do the work before going into applying things. And I think that we've already touched on it, but the networking, understand, talk to people, use the networks around you, which are natural. We've already touched on, which we don't normally, it's so much about friends and family, but it's very valuable. But then others as well, people through work colleagues. And I think the last part I would say is having confidence. And it does come back to this thing about when people in the community have got tremendous skills and experience, and it's just having that confidence to go into the next stage and not. And we do find this, interesting enough, with a lot of military women actually, who perhaps are less confident. And our key message is, don't think necessarily that you have to have absolutely every single thing on the job spec or on the advert. Quite often you've got so much more just out here which will allow all these things to happen. And so there is an interesting about confidence. Be confident, without sounding overconfident, particularly when it comes to an interview. Just then be yourself. So I think some really key things there. And I suppose going back to the more seasonal thing is, I think it seems to me from the conversation we've had, a huge opportunity to get into something, try it, which could be great, pretty hard work, good money, and my goodness me, it can lead to a longer term thing, which is Ryan's example, or it's a short term thing and then you go off somewhere else, but you can come back into it. It also can be something which you can be flexible enough and do on top of your other role, for extra money. But I think that we've covered quite a few themes there actually. And I think, that there are a lot of support mechanisms out there. So I don't think we want people to think that it's all a bit of, where do I find out? Because there are an awful lot of things. Actually, it's interesting. I mean, I think, it's interesting practicing interviews, doing group things, etc., going online. I mean, increasingly, as we found over COVID, an awful lot of interviews don't happen face to face; they are online. So, but I think a lot of people are now more used to doing this sort of thing, speaking, but that includes having a pretty crunchy interview with a future employer. So, just sort of coming to the stage. I mean, is there anything more, Claire or Ryan, in terms of M&S about what to expect from? We may well have covered it, but is there anything more we want to say about the seasonal side, which we haven't covered yet, which you'd like to say? Perhaps Claire, is there anything more to?
I was just going to touch on, obviously, the process. So
Right.
It's always better, isn't it, to understand what does that process look like. So without going into too much detail and giving away, some of the shining questions, but there's a screening opportunity first in terms of, I think it's like a 20-minute screening that you would do online, but all of our interviews now are pretty much back face-to-face. So that means you get to connect with a person, you get to see and almost be in that environment that you're applying for. So, for example, if there was an opportunity in my store, you would actually come to the store. So you can almost feel what that would look like if you were working there. And our interview is all about the customer, because that's what we do. That's what we're here for. So, when we apply for different roles, as we've talked about today, we talk openly that the customer's at the heart of everything. And I think we're all customers. So therefore, that gives us all a great opportunity to understand what, that interview requires. So it's not as daunting as it might generally feel. And there will be people, I can guarantee your interviewers will be more nervous than yourself, because they're looking for the right people and they might, be thinking of all these questions they want to ask. So don't always think that, you're going to be the most nervous, because you're probably not. But yeah, just from a date point of view, we open our seasonal recruitment from the 24th of October online, which is all on the M&S Careers website. So that's a really easy place to go, and you can register your interest now, and you will get job alerts if there's anything that you that you want to look into further. So yeah.
It's great to have that date. So 24th of October, that's the thing to mention. But I mean, so between now and then, plenty of time to do the preparation, scope the market, etc., and then get the applications in. No, very, very useful actually. There's lots of very useful tips and stuff. So no, it's good. But and Joanne, any thoughts that you've got in terms of having listened to what we've been talking about today?
No, I mean, I'm just reflecting on what Claire just said about the interviewers are probably more nervous. I always tell that when we're giving advice and guidance, that the job role that you're going for, you're there to interview them as well. It always makes people feel a little bit more confident because they don't think about it that way. So I'm always telling people that, remember, you're there to find out about the organisation, the people that you're going to be working for. Treat it as you're interviewing them also. So it's funny that you mentioned that, Claire, from your perspective as well.
I think it's a great. I remember somebody told me a long time ago. What do people? It's in an interview situation. Can you do the job? Do you want the job, and will you fit in? I think that the fitting in bit about an M&S, complete focus on the customer. It's a bit like, say, for us in a charity, our most important thing we always got to think about is our beneficiaries, people who are. Otherwise, if we didn't think about them, we wouldn't. There's no point for us to exist. But for companies like M&S doing such an amazing job, it is all about the customer experience. And I think so. Anyone going into it has got to make sure we get across that huge sort of commitment and sense of purpose for it. No, good. Well, I think it's been Ryan, got any other sort of final thoughts then, Ryan, at all?
No, just reflecting on everything that we've said then, it's very positive. Like Claire said, there's massive opportunities still out there for any part of the business to join us. As a business, we're definitely looking for flexible colleagues, flexible workforce. We're looking for people that want to work 4 days instead of 5 days. We're looking for colleagues that want to work 9 and 14. Early mornings or late nights. The flexibility within the business is massive. So there's something out there for everybody.
That's a great conclusion, actually, to come to a close on this, isn't it? Thanks very much, Ryan, and actually thank you, Claire, and thank you, Joanne, as well. But it's been a fantastic conversation chat over the last 55 minutes, really, and it's an area which, I'll be honest, I haven't had so much experience. Sometimes we think we understand it, but my goodness, the tips and insights I think which have come up about the sector, about the need, about the opportunities. So it isn't just about one set of things. It's not just about Christmas either, although that is a big focus. There is lots there, and it's opportunities for people to come into something and try it. And if it works and you do well, then clearly there's an opportunity for it to carry on much through life and be more permanent. So it's also an opportunity to do something perhaps just on top of your other roles for a bit of extra cash, working hard at a time when perhaps people need that. So that, again, that's another reason. So I think there's an awful lot of useful thoughts that we've been going through, and hopefully that's been useful for everybody. So it's great. Thanks for all the comments which have been coming in, and I hope we've answered most of these as they've been coming up in the conversation which we had over the last 55 minutes. So overall, I think it's a very exciting opportunity. Think about the dates. End of September, early October. There's a deadline. Well, things starting for M&S, 24th of October. Start thinking about that if you're wanting to go for this. And I'm sure with all the skills and attributes that people have got, which again we've been talking about, hopefully that's become clearer, if anything, over this last hour, that you can use those skills and get the job that you want. So thank you very much indeed for listening. I know we've been going out on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Thanks for all the questions, and thank you again to the panel, or the guests, Claire, Ryan, and Joanne. It's been great to see you on this Friday afternoon, and I hope you all have a lovely weekend when you get there. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye for now.